Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about garden history and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is October 24th. Well, my dear garden friend, there is a particular melancholy that settles over the garden in late October, a bittersweet ballet of golden light and falling leaves. And just as nature begins its grand retreat, we, too, must usher our summer companions back indoors. Of course, I'm talking about houseplants that have enjoyed a nice summer stretch in the sun or in a sheltered spot. Elizabeth Arnhem once wrote, "A garden, I find, is never so lovely as when it has to be protected from the frost." I must confess, I've been playing the role of both judge and jury with my own collection of houseplants. One has to be rather ruthless at this junction, a quality that our dear Vita Sackville West would have appreciated. The greatest service which can be rendered to any country, she said, is to add a useful plant to its culture. But I dare say the second greatest service might be knowing when to let some of them go. Today I thought I'd share what experience has taught me about this autumnal tradition of moving houseplants back indoors. First, be discerning. Select only your healthiest specimens for the indoor performance ahead. Those leggy geraniums and spotted coleus, perhaps it's time to thank them for their service and bid them farewell to the compost heap. Second, consider this an opportunity for generosity. Those plants you can't accommodate? Surely a neighbor or a local garden club would welcome such botanical gifts. After all, a gardener's heart is nothing if not generous. This past week, my dear neighbor Maria came over, and she helped me go through not only all of my houseplants on the front porch, but also all of my big terracotta pot collection that I keep in and around the front porch area. As a result of her generosity with me, she and her little daughter Sophia were able to make friends with some new houseplants that they could take back home across the street. They made many trips that afternoon. And then, of course, we ended the day by heading inside and making a batch of my mom's apple bars, one of my favorite things to make this time of year. Now, my third tip, examine your pots with the scrutiny of a detective. Are they worthy vessels for your plants? If not, then donate them. If you're trying to get a color scheme together, a certain look or vibe, then now is the time to upgrade any containers that have seen better days. Finally, make sure that you quarantine your outdoor houseplants before you introduce them to their indoor cousins. Think of it as a proper Victorian calling period. 2 weeks should suffice to ensure that no unwanted pests crash your winter garden party. I always inspect for frogs and insects, any little castaways that might be lurking in the foliage or in the pot somewhere. And make sure to check the bottom of your pots because those little drainage holes can become homes for all kinds of critters. So you want to make sure that you're free and clear and good to bring them back indoors. And the best place to check for that is outside. Much easier to deal with a frog or a mouse outside than it is in the house. It's time for today's botanical history. Today is the birthday of Marianne North, who was born on this day in 1830. She's one of the most extraordinary botanical artists ever to wield a brush. Picture, if you will, a proper Victorian lady who dared to be anything but proper. While other women of her station were arranging flowers in vases, Marianne was charging through the jungles and scaling mountains to paint flowers where they grew. She wrote, "I had long dreamed of going to some tropical country to paint its peculiar vegetation on the spot in natural abundance." Can you imagine, my friend, 900 plant species captured in oil paintings, and each one of them painted in their natural habitat? Today, Marianne's legacy lives on in the most remarkable way. If you visit Kew Gardens in London, you'll find an entire gallery dedicated to her work. It's the only permanent solo exhibition by a female artist in Britain. But perhaps even more telling are the plants that bear her name. Northia seychellana, which is a tree that she discovered in the Seychelles, and then Nepenthes northiana, a spectacular pitcher plant from Borneo. Isn't it wonderful to think of this Victorian lady, her oil paints and easel in tow, venturing off into the world's wildest places? She once complained while she was traveling by coach in Australia, the place that Darwin had told her to go. She said, "They never stop where the flowers are." A sentiment that I'm sure many of us have felt just in the car as we're looking out the window and we see all these fantastic plants just whizzing by us. My husband will rarely stop the car for me to get out and look at a plant, but every now and then I can talk him into it. It was on this day, October 24th in 1843, that nature reminded us all why gardeners must never procrastinate. The New England farmer out of Boston, Massachusetts, shared quite the cautionary tale in their November 1st edition. October 24th, it was a Sunday night in 1843, and then winter decides to make an absurdly early entrance. The good people of Vermont awoke to find their world buried under, as the paper reported 12 to 15 inches of snow fell overnight. The letter writer from Sutton, Vermont, in this particular article, captured the shock perfectly, writing, "It has taken us entirely by surprise. Nearly half of all the potatoes are yet in the ground. In fact, our farmers were in the very center of their fall work when this visitation came upon them." Now, my dear garden friends, while we can hope that Mother Nature won't be quite so dramatic this year, this historical surprise snowfall serves as rather perfect advice for us all. As the beloved garden writer Carol Capek once noted, the greatest enemy of gardens are not slugs, not even gardeners, but procrastination. Well, before winter sneaks up on us like it did those Vermont farmers, might I suggest taking a thoughtful walk through your garden? You see, as the perennials fade and the leaves drift away, our gardens reveal their secrets. There is still so much to do outside. That trowel that vanished in July, it might just turn up beside the phlox. That wobbly trellis that you've been meaning to fix, it's never more obvious than now when the clematis has shed its leafy cover. And speaking of garden revelations, now is the perfect time to bid a gracious farewell to those items that have served their purpose but won't survive another season. That cracked terracotta pot that's been hiding behind the hydrangeas, that splintering garden bench that's seen one too many winters. As Gertrude Jekyll wisely observed, a garden is a grand teacher. It teaches patience and careful watchfulness. It teaches industry and thrift. And above all, it teaches entire trust. All right, it was on this day in 1874 that a remarkable woman who would become known as the Pink Lady was born in Clyde, New York. Cora Older, who, like her contemporary Gertrude Jekyll, understood that a garden is not just a collection of plants, but a canvas for artistic expression. Cora was born to an apple grower in upstate New York, and she might have lived a quiet life had fate not intervened during her summer break from Syracuse University. As the story goes, she was performing in an amateur theatrical in Sacramento when a newspaper man named Fremont Older spotted her from the audience. Within a month, they were married. She was just 18. He was 37. Yes, I know, that's quite the age gap. But the two of them were truly in love, and they began a partnership that would flourish as abundantly as their future gardens. For years, Cora and Fremont lived a nomadic life in San Francisco hotels, while Fremont pursued his career as a crusading newspaper editor. But in 1913, they discovered something magical in the hills above Cupertino, a piece of land that they would turn into their beloved home, which they called Wood Hills. Much like Vita Sackville West at Sissinghurst, Cora created a garden that became a gathering place for literary giants and social reformers alike. Every weekend, the garden paths would be graced by some of America's finest minds. Carl Sandburg reading poetry among the roses, Lincoln Steffens debating politics beneath the wisteria, Clarence Darrow pondering justice in the shade of ancient oaks. But perhaps her most creative touch was incorporating broken pottery and tiles from a San Jose factory into the garden walls and paths at Wood Hill. She created magical mosaics that would catch the light and sparkle like jewels. During World War II, Cora showed the same grit as the victory gardeners of the era. As Elsie Robinson reported in 1942, during sizzling July and August, Cora has been climbing the hundreds of apricot and prune trees which spread across her big ranch at Cupertino, picking the fruit herself. At nearly 70 years old, she made 4 jolting trips down the mountain trail with the crop each day. Cora's obituary later noted that she remained active in the management of her estate at Wood Hills Farm, and she continued writing daily until about 3 years before her death. Cora lived to be 93. She outlived her beloved Fremont by 33 years. She tended her roses and wrote stories until nearly the end. Today, my garden friend, Wood Hill stands protected on the National Register of Historic Places. When the house opens its doors to visitors, they can still see Cora's artistic touch in every corner of the garden, a living testament to her legacy of beauty, creativity, and resilience. It was on this day in 2014 that the gardening world lost one of its most passionate voices, Margaret Owen, the remarkable Queen of Snowdrops. Born to a Scottish farmer near Watford in 1930, Margaret learned early that gardens and farming could coexist beautifully. Margaret once reflected, "My father was unusual. There aren't many farmers who garden as well as farm." Her dad nicknamed her Maggie Mott after a scented viola, a flower that she would faithfully grow in every garden she tended throughout her life. It was at her beloved garden that she called The Patch, an acre of land in Shropshire, where Margaret's horticultural magic truly flourished. Every year, on the last Saturday in February, she would host what would become legendary snowdrop parties. Picture this, my garden friend. 50 of the country's most dedicated galanthophiles navigating winding country lanes to gather for a garden tour, followed by Margaret's hearty stew and endless talk of their beloved galanthus, or snowdrops. Well, my garden friend, perhaps we might remember Margaret's example that a garden is not just for ourselves, but a gift to be shared with others. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, A Life in the Garden by Barbara Damrosch. This book came out just this month, October 1st, and the subtitle is Tales and Tips for Growing Food in Every Season. Well, this book is a must-have. Anything by Barbara Damrosch falls into that category. I love what the New York Botanical Gardens Plant Talk said about Barbara's essence. They called her the Julia Child of gardening. And just as Julia demystified French cooking for American homes, Barbara has made sustainable, small-scale gardening accessible for us all. Well, this new hardcover is divided into 5 thoughtful parts: why I grow food, where to start, the garden year, sharing the garden, love that one, and what to grow. Barbara takes us through everything from garden geometry to the secrets of growing perfect tomatoes, all with what the Seattle Times calls the snap of a good snow pea and the spice of an old rose. Now, let me share a quick passage from Chapter 5 that I think perfectly captures Barbara's ability to tackle universal gardening challenges with both wisdom and wit. So this is an excerpt from her chapter called Feeding the Soil. Here's what Barbara wrote. Among gardeners, soil envy abounds. Try living on a glacial moraine, one will grumble. Millions of years ago, a receding glacier casually dropped rocks all over my yard, leaving me to dig them up and haul them away. No sooner do I do that, and evil forces push up more from below. You think you have troubles, whines another. My soil is sandy, so it doesn't hold water and nutrients well. And the corn is as high as an elephant's toenail in summers if we don't get rain. That's nothing, wails a third. Job had better soil than mine. Have you ever tried to till gumbo clay? When it's too wet, it's like glue. When it's too dry, it can form an impenetrable crust, cracked like the surface of an inhospitable planet, and I need a jackhammer to dig the parsnips. Well, I bet one of those is resonating with you right now. Barbara writes, the fact is that every type of soil texture, based on the size of its mineral particles, has its virtues. Sandy soil warms up fast in the spring, is easy to dig, and drains well after rain. Carrots love it. Clay tends to be fertile, holding on to moisture and soluble nutrients in times of drought, to the delight of peas and beans. Then silt is in between, and even soil with lots of visible rocks has its good points. Once I followed my friend Deborah's pigs through some oak woods while she showed me their foraging habits. "There," she said, pointing to a favorite stony patch. "Stones hold the sun's heat well, producing tasty roots and luring worms and other soil life that the pigs love. You must make the best of your soil's texture." Isn't that just perfectly Barbara? The way she takes something as potentially dry as soil composition and turns it into an engaging conversation, cleverly disguised as simply a leisurely stroll through the garden. This book is 378 pages that will teach you how to grow food successfully in every season while making you feel like you're getting advice from a cherished garden mentor. You can get a copy of A Life in the Garden by Barbara Damrosch and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $30. Well, to close the show today, I'd like to share a diary entry from exactly 150 years ago, October 24th, 1874. Henry Arthur Bright was penning his thoughts in A Year in a Lancashire Garden, capturing the essence of a Victorian autumn day. As we listen to his words, notice how some garden challenges, like losing beloved trees to storms and preparing for winter, remain unchanged across the centuries. October 24th. Since I wrote, we have had a great gale, which has swept over us and torn down an elm in the wood and a fine chestnut in the croft. I could ill spare either of them, and it is but poor comfort to think that our piled-up logs will outlast the winter. We are now preparing our mushroom bed, for we shall need it as the green vegetables fail us. I have said little about the kitchen garden, for I do not suppose it differs much from that of other people. Our peas served us particularly well. We had our last dish on October 1st. One excellent vegetable that I have generally grown, and I would thoroughly recommend it to anyone who has space to spare it, is the French white haricot. It is often not seen with us, though it is very common in France. It's a species of French bean, of which you eat the white bean itself instead of slicing up the pod. We are now busy with our planting. Some rhododendrons and acubas in the borders near the front gate have been pining away, starved by the elm tree roots around them. We are trenching up the ground, cutting away what smaller roots we can, and putting in manure and some new shrubs. We are planting a new row of hollies to screen a wall towards the lane. We are moving a Salisburia adiantifolia, or a ginkgo, with its strange foliage, like a gigantic maidenhair fern, from a corner into a more prominent place. We have now to take in our tender and half-hardy plants for fear of a sudden frost. The large myrtles, which have stood out in their boxes, must be placed in safety, and the Lobelia cardinalis and other bedding plants, which we may need next year, must be removed. Well, that's it for today's show. I hope you're finding beauty in your autumn garden, whether you're bringing in tender plants like Henry Bright, planting your spring bulbs like Margaret Owen with her beloved snowdrops, or perhaps creating your own garden legacy like Cora Older. Remember that every season in the garden brings its own gifts, even when those gifts come disguised as fallen trees that will outlast the winter. Like these remarkable gardeners that we met today, take time to document your garden journey, whether through photographs or journals, or simply quiet observation. And don't forget to share your garden's bounty with others, just as Margaret Owen shared her precious snowdrops and Cora Older opened her garden to friends and strangers alike. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.